Okay, well, thanks everyone for taking the time out of your day to meet with me. In today's session, I'm going to be talking about how we can use threat intelligence to enhance your threat hunting capability. So, not a tutorial on how to threat hunt, but more how threat intelligence can be used to complement threat hunting. So, in the agenda for today is, what is threat hunting? I'll give it just a brief view for those people that may not have a clear picture of it, why, and the different types of models and so forth that people use. We'll dig in a little bit deeper into the things you need to hunt effectively, and then just bring it all together. So it's going to be a relatively short one, but feel free to ask any questions. I've got the chat open, so yeah, don't hesitate to ask any questions as we go along the way. So for people that don't know me, my name's Tim Peters. I work for a company called Threat Quotient. They are they make a threat intelligence platform. However, this talk is not about the product that Threat Quotient make. It is quite generic in regards to using the principles that a threat analyst would use. I'm a bit of a nerd, and I'm quite old, so I tend to shout at clouds quite a bit. So, why do we need to threat hunt? So if we look at the sort of a very high level definition, it's taking a proactive approach to search for known indicators of compromise that align to the way that an adversary goes about their attack. So the TTPs, you all would all be familiar with the tactics, techniques, and procedures. The goal is really to find any undetected compromise within the environment. So, with the way that attackers or adversaries go about their business, they're trying to evade detection. So there may be, you've got to look for the breadcrumbs and the signs that something may have happened. But, why would you start? And it might be that you receive some intelligence of a known threat. You might have received an advisory saying that your organization may have been breached. There's media coverage about an emerging threat. If you think back a few years ago, the Log4j, that been a big news. You could be in a position where you can proactively search against your critical assets. As you mature more in your threat intelligence program, you could be starting to look for adversaries that may be potentially attacking your industry vertical, your type of organization, or your organization as it stands. Or it's part of a part of an incident response activities when trying to look to see if there's any backdoors or any other indicators out there. So we've all probably seen the mean time to detection. These days vary. It can be as low as immediate to 30 days, or in some cases 180, 200 days. Really, what I'm trying to illustrate here is that we want to try and be proactive. And whilst we are stretched for resources and being asked to do more than what we currently can handle, we can use a lot of our own techniques to automate a lot of these things to help identify any potential indicators or activity in your environment that needs further investigation and move into that manual detection. So from an organizational perspective, we're looking at, what are the different types of threat hunting that you would use? So depending on the size of your organization, how many people are in the security team, if it's a large organization, you would have different teams doing different things. But from a security analyst perspective, your role is to protect the organization, but you also want to start to look for evidence of a breach in the environment. That didn't trigger an alert. It's all happy days when the tools and controls we have in place trigger an alert, but we're looking for the unknown. From a threat analyst perspective, you're looking at threat intelligence data in bulk and looking at previous attacks, trying to predict, in a sense, predict the weather as to if the adversary is going to attack your type of organization. What are the tactics and techniques? What are they using? How do they go about their business? So you can take a proactive approach to say, look, can we withstand an attack from this type of adversary? And then you've got malware threat hunting, where they're looking at the code, they're reverse engineering things and identifying new signatures that can be shared back out into the community to help others from there. So one of the models that is used that you might be familiar with is the diamond model. So this was developed by the US Department of Defense. It's really used to analyze capabilities, intentions, and the vulnerabilities of an adversary. As much as they're looking for our vulnerabilities in organizations, we want to try and look for their vulnerabilities. We want to look for their weaknesses so we can get them essentially to change their tactics. And if they change their tactics, it's more and more likely that they are going to stuff up, or they're going to trigger something that is going to alert us to something happening. So we can see on the right-hand side a little bit of a sort of graphic. This is taken from the book Visual Threat Intelligence, which is a book that was recently released by Thomas Rockyer. I recommend anybody that is interested in threat intelligence to go and purchase this book. It's about $19. But where we're focusing on the adversary, we're focusing on the victim, we're focusing on the infrastructure, and we're focusing on the capabilities. So really, we're trying to bring all of that together to understand how a threat actor would go about their business. So keep that in mind when we start to then try to overlay the diamond model in the pyramid of pain. And if this is something that you're familiar with, it's looking at the complexity of bypassing existing detection controls. And it's broken down into there on the right-hand side. I've listed the different types of threat intelligence. There's tactical threat intelligence, operational threat intelligence, and strategic threat intelligence. When you look at this, you're focusing from a tactical perspective, is really looking about the hash values, IP addresses, and domain names. They're the tactical. They're as the saying goes, the low-hanging fruit. So they're easy, trivial. There's something that can be implemented quite quickly, and that can be used to your advantage by taking threat intelligence and that you receive from multiple sources, from a source or from wherever, and applying that and looking for those in your organization. Then we go into the operational threat intelligence, where we're looking at things that are a little bit tricky, your network artifacts, your tools. And then finally, at your strategic level, we're looking at the tactics, techniques, and procedures. And that's tough to sort of work out, because sometimes they hide in plain sight. A process might actually, on the surface, be hard to differentiate between something that a process is malicious or it's actually benign and is part of everyday how someone conducts their work, or how an application is structured and it kicks off different processes and things like that. So you can, it is really, really tough, and it takes a lot of dedication and to understand at that sort of level. So, a lot of organizations that I deal with on a day-to-day basis are really at the sort of the tactical threat intelligence and your operational threat intelligence. There are your large financial industries that have taken the strategic approach, and they do have dedicated teams within there. So if we break that down a little bit more, we can start to see about how we go about threat hunting. So from that perspective, we need to look at what are the things that we need to have in place. So from an organization perspective, if we've got our SIEM, we've got our, potentially we have a threat intelligence platform. We don't necessarily need to have that. You could have a threat intelligence feed coming into your SIEM as such. That can help start the ball rolling. What starts to be helpful and give you that coverage is by utilizing the data and feeding the data from your threat intelligence into your endpoints, your sandboxes, your vulnerability scanners, any anomaly detection, basically as many tools that you have in your environment that can accept threat intelligence data, but also can feed back data to and create alerts for you to let you know that something has matched or something is needs further investigation. So the more that you have working together, the better it is for you. So when we look at that, we don't want to send everything over to our SIEM, to our EDR tools and so forth. Realistically, the amount of data that comes in from multiple threat intelligence sources or even from single feeds that you may subscribe to can be an overload. And you've got to be wary and find that balance, because some products that you have may only be able to accept a certain amount. So, for example, an EDR tool may only be able to accept 15,000 hashes, but you may have 1 million hashes in there. So in your threat intelligence platform or in your feed. So how do you prioritize? Well, you prioritize by enriching, and people that have joined, been on previous calls, is something that I do focus on because it really makes life simpler down the track. You want to enrich that data with as much of new information as possible. You want to automate as much as possible, but the way that you prioritize is gaining the information that you receive from your threat intelligence and coupling that with the business context. So, what is it that is specific to your organization? An example is that you don't want to be sending, information to your SIEM or EDR for products that don't exist in your environment. They're just going to be, skipping over and never trigger anything. So you want to be sending stuff that is specific to your environment over there, and then you prioritize that. So when we go and focus on our threat hunting, whether it's automated or automated led or human led, we want to focus on the priority, the stuff that's important, the stuff that is going to be happening now, that could potentially cause us pain. So if we look now at the tactical CTI, hash values, they're quite common. They're easy to get. We can draw those from many sources. IP addresses, whilst are common, it's very rare that that an adversary will use those same IPs for the same attack. They'll use VPNs, Tor, exit nodes, the proxies and so forth. So having to recycle those IPs quite often is important, because an IP address can change quite quickly. Domain names, whilst a bit harder, they can register new domain names. We've seen that happen at time. So tactical threat intelligence is really focusing on the low-hanging fruit. It also informs our decision making. What do we have to focus on today? What do we have to look out for? You know, as I said, we can gain those pretty easily. We can, you know, we can identify what's going on, and we can automate those processes so we don't have to really worry too much about those particular indicators, searching through them manually. So it's really important because that's the volume. So when I've got here the last bit, care with lifecycle management, is talking about those IP addresses. They change so rapidly. So having to send, you know, constantly sending new IP addresses to your block list on your firewall, or to your SIEM to look for things, you need to make sure that they're updated on a regular basis. So if we move now into sort of the operational threat intelligence and overlaying that with threat hunting, you know, these are, you know, can be challenging. Reason being is that tools, you know, using existing tools that we know, like, you know, your Metasploit, your, now I've just forgotten the word, but, you know, any of those, you know, tools that are known, are easy to find. It's when an adversary develops their own tool that we need to be, you know, mindful of. So looking at the behavior, you know, something like PowerShell, if you've got PowerShell enabled in your environment, you know, that can be hidden. You know, an adversary can use that to their advantage and do things that are hidden in plain sight, because PowerShell is allowed. You see lots of PowerShell in the environment being triggered because that's used as part of the day-to-day operations in some cases. You know, network artifacts are, again, difficult because you've got to find the anomaly. It's finding the needle in the haystack, which is always hard, but not impossible. Sending your threat intelligence data with, you know, the IPs or with the names of files that can be searched for, based around the intelligence data that says these are the types of tools that an adversary would use, makes life easier. But this is where you start to move from your automated led threat hunting into your human led. So this is where you're focusing your time and looking for the 1% of the 1%. So you're taking your data, you're running it through your own sandboxes, you're identifying what's happening. You've got your malware analysts reverse engineering things, looking for patterns, looking at any command and control communication, looking for any things that might be odd. And you know, with the volume of data, when you look at even your PC can generate a lot of network traffic, understanding what is good and what is bad can be really, really tough. But you know, threat intelligence plays that part, and it helps with collaboration between, and this is if your organization has those different teams, you know, incident response team or your dedicated threat hunting teams as such. So moving on into the last sort of phase of that strategic threat intelligence, you know, really what we're trying to use through the tactics and techniques and procedures that we get from our threat intel data is really identifying what is the adversary's identity. That's important, but it's not the be and end all. You know, focusing on the adversary's goals, focusing on the adversary's strategy is going to help you understand if there's something that you need to look for. So from a threat hunter's perspective, looking at what their goals are, what are the objectives that they need to succeed. You know, are they capturing you know, domain admins? Well, how are we protecting that? What are, you know, when we're threat hunting for there? So that's close ties between, you know, threat hunting, red teaming, incident response is what are their goals, and what are the things that they're leaving behind that give us the a way of detecting them. But what is their strategy? How do they approach and design their attacks? By understanding that and going back to the TTPs, we can start to plot out and say, okay, this is where I need to start focusing on from a threat hunting perspective, because if this type of adversary is using these techniques or these procedures, then I want to start looking for those in our environment. Again, very manual, because it's hard to automate. You need to have a good understanding of the adversaries, their motivations. What are their goals? What are their capabilities? How good are they? When you're dealing against, if they're obfuscating a lot of their tracks or cleaning up after themselves, you've got an adversary that is a lot more capable than somebody that's just going out and shotgun approach and seeing what they can do. But really, by doing that and understanding how they approach things, you can then control how they potentially approach an attack against your organization, get them to change their tactics, get them to change some of their techniques that they use or some of the tooling that they use, because from that perspective, they could slip up. And if they slip up, you're there to catch them, and you can then trigger an incident response process to make sure that they are out and don't come back in, and you limit the damage that they may cause. So bring that together, and like I said, it is a quick one. When we're looking at IOC-driven threat hunting, we want to focus on the known indicators. So we want to look and automate that process. We may do some manual investigation as part of looking back at a particular infection, looking for patient zero, looking for any persistence and things like that. But generally speaking, we want to try and automate that process as much as we can. When we go into sort of your TTP-driven, we're moving into that proactive, preemptive time. We're looking for those anomalies. Some might call it indicators of actions, indicators of behavior. But really what we're trying to do is identify suspicious or behavior that that looks odd. And that again moves from that automation way to human-led. So think of using your saw. At what point does a human get involved to then take the lead and so forth? When you go into those hypothesis-driven proactive approach, that's when you're at the top of the pyramid of pain, and you're really looking at if creating those hypotheses and saying, if a threat actor or an adversary is going to attack us, this is how they would approach that. Let's map that to our controls that we have in place. Are there any gaps? So if you think back to the MITRE ATT&CK navigator, where it displays all the eye chart that displays all the TTPs and then overlays that onto of a particular adversary, you then want to be able to overlay your controls in your environment over the top of that to see if there are any gaps, and then look to see how well you would stand up to an attack. So that's very, very human-led. There's a lot of analysis going into there. There's looking at previous campaigns, looking for any deviations that an adversary may have taken on different types of attacks. So when we bring that all together, really threat intelligence can help being that starting point for threat hunters. It's that ability to have that baseline and use that as their starting point for priority and focus on what they need to do. It complements the existing threat hunting capabilities and the skills that a threat hunter does have. When starting out, you don't want to try and boil the ocean. Again, like as I mentioned before, you want to integrate as much as you can so you can automate. Visibility is key. You can't protect what you can't see. And don't try and go from looking for indicators of compromise all straight up to start trying to look at adversaries and trying to track adversaries and looking at how they approach their campaigns and so forth. Take that crawl before you can walk before you crawl before you can walk before you can run. But make sure your current controls are configured correctly to allow you to respond quickly. Automate that easy stuff. Move from that tactical CTI to your operational. Operational CTI is time consuming, but it's not impossible. Start slow. Don't, again, try to boil that ocean. Because, strategic CTI does require dedicated analysts, and it does take a lot of time. That teams are, whether they're in an organization or those CTI analysts that are focusing on those strategic adversaries for your threat intelligence sources, they are really focused on understanding how a threat actor goes about things. So very high level, very sort of broad brush strokes. I've purposely held back and whilst not showing how to go and do that, simply because each way, there's lots of different ways to approach this. Look at the SANS threat hunting in the way that they describe. You've got automated tools in such as your EDR or your XDR capabilities that can help with that approach and automate a lot of those tasks. So a lot of that time that you're already one step ahead from that perspective, because you're using that to your advantage. So with that very short, sharp, and sweet presentation, thank you very much. If there's questions that you do have, happy to answer those. Like always, I'm running out of ideas. So if anybody is keen to sort of pick up where I've left off in terms of presenting, I'd be more than happy and welcome for you to present. So yeah, with that said, are there any questions? Okay. Well, if there aren't any questions, I don't want to hold people up. Feel free to reach out to me directly if you want to. Yeah, I'll have the recording up, and I'll let everybody know through Meetup and post it on LinkedIn and Twitter once that's done, so you can go back and review that if you wish. But thank you everyone for your time. If you are interested in presenting on a topic, please let me know, because like I said, I'm running out of ideas. So thank you everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day and your evening. So yeah, we'll speak to you. We'll see you soon on the next one. Thank you.